tell us how you first came across all this wealth of archival material.
So I was doing an oral history, like just a family oral history with my uncle, who is a music producer. His name is Steve Lindsay. And I was really after getting the story behind his time working with Leonard Cohen, and especially the story about how he sired a son with Leonard Cohen's accountant, who then she ended up stealing all Leonard Cohen's money, which forced him to go back on tour. Anyway, it was a very interesting story, but then in the midst of this interview, I heard him talk about at the time he was Larry Flynt's videographer. And so I asked what happened to the footage, and he said it's just been in a storage facility in the valley for 33 years. So I pestered him enough, and finally he called me and said, if you want to pick it up, come by, but like you have to come with a pickup truck because there are 20 boxes of footage, or else I'm just gonna throw this in the dump. And so fortunately I had a pickup truck and I drove to the valley and loaded all the 20 boxes into the pickup truck, and then as I was loading in the last box, he said, it's probably all garbage, but I mean, if you can find the Vicki Morgan sex tape, that might be of some worth. And I immediately took it to Different by Design, a wonderful post house in LA, and we started digitizing the tapes, and literally the last tape to be digitized was the sex tape.
Wow. So from there, I mean, tell us a little bit about the journey of molding this story. I mean, with all this material, like, how did you conceptualize it?
Well, so that was the first archive, and after watching it all, then I determined that there really was a story that hadn't been told before. I think that in The People versus Larry Flynt, it's really just mentioned in passing, his desire to run for president. So when I was starting to do more research, I could just see that this was the time in his life that was also creatively the most potent, and also so much came from those a few months. I mean, the Campari ad that then resulted in the Supreme Court win. So these like few months to focus on that was definitely always that was interesting for me. And then just went through Larry's own archive. Fortunately, he gave carte blanche access to it without any need to watch the film or have any kind of creative control whatsoever. And then just through like the network of the people who were involved in tracking down the writers and the people who I saw in the footage, I came across more archives. So it's just like you gather all this material and then shape the story. So I think that I guess just to give one anecdote of what like helped me shape it, I would say that Althea was always a character that I was fascinated by, and like towards the very beginning, like before I even got funding, I knew that I wanted to interview Paul Krasner because he was pretty old, and he was the publisher of The Realist and also the editor of How to Talk Dirty and Influence People by Lenny Bruce. And in Larry's mind, he was kind of like Paul, who wrote the Gospels, because in his mind, Lenny Bruce was Jesus. So he was the first person we interviewed, and I went out to Palm Desert to interview him. And it was a great interview. It didn't make it in here, but after that, I took a bunch of shrooms and went to the Integratron and listened to the sound bowls. And I had this vision, like Althea came to me in this vision, and she was beautiful, and she was like rising up from this purple lake. And she basically said to me, there are 1,000 ways to fuck up this film, but if you always tell the film as a woman, like you tell the story like as a woman filmmaker, then you might have you might have a film that's not totally fucked up. So I don't really even know what the message was. Obviously, it was like, myself talking to myself. But that was always a criteria for me. And, and as I would battle with producers about what to show or not, a lot of, I was battling with a lot of like these male producers who really wanted to tone Larry down, and they were afraid of alienating the audience, and they really wanted to just beige him, and that was just sacrilegious in my mind. And also, as a woman, like when I was going through the porn and going through what I wanted to show of Hustler, I had to feel like it was like there was humor to it, like that the models were enjoying themselves, and then I also had to check myself too, like with some of the things that Larry said definitely offended me, but to tell the story in a way where like I wasn't censoring him, I had to keep that in. So the point of a lot of the magazine is to offend.
Questions from the audience?
Did he see it before he died?
He did. Unfortunately, he didn't see it in an audience because we were gonna. He was gonna see it with an audience, but then COVID made that impossible. So we waited a little bit, and then I sent him a Blu-ray, so he watched that with his wife.
So he remarried? He
did. He remarried his nurse. He's old school.
The film kind of alludes, it talks about the idea that he was kind of having a manic episode, and yet it seemed like he was very much himself during that time. So what's your take on that?
I think that Larry's self is kind of manic. And if you look at other chapters of his life, he's a manic guy. So I think that his, Timothy Leary called it his the great flame out. It was definitely probably the most manic period of his life, but he was coming from 5 years of being completely dead to the world. So it was a manic upswing, but he was being his genuine self. So it's tough.
Questions?
Talk about editing, that much archival material and making hard decisions to cut moments that you like or find the rhythms, like that. Great stuff.
Yeah, it's tough when there are some really interesting scenes that don't fit into the emotional tracking of the film. Or are just way too bizarre that they would require too much of a backstory or just too much of a digression. So some of my favorite moments were actually not in the film, and the first scene that we actually cut as a sample scene to get into labs and grants didn't end up being in the film, and this was on the 20th anniversary of the assassination of JFK. Larry decided that it would be part of his campaign to reenact the whole event, the motorcade. So landing in Love Field and then taking these limos, to the grassy knoll and having somebody light off firecrackers at the moment where JFK was shot. So and then having someone then throw ketchup on his face and being taken to the same hospital for his wounds to be treated. It was just it was a crazy act of performance art, and it was visually really interesting too, but didn't end up being in the film because it was happening way too close to the time he was imprisoned in DeLorean, and it's just too much of a digression. Another thing that was hard was not having an episode really dedicated to his shooter, and that was a decision based on the fact that I decided early on to stay in the timeline of what was known then, and also not to see him, as he is and as he was recently, telling the story from who he is now. So really like staying in the time of of like the 1980s or the 70s even. And at the time, nobody knew who shot him. So this was only information that came out like in 2013 actually, when this white supremacist was on death row for many other crimes. And he said, I shot Larry Flynt too. I was offended by an interracial spread in the magazine. And that was really hard not to include. And the only way it really could have been would be if it was at the very end as a kind of coda.
More questions?
What kind of team did you put together? What was like the timeline for doing that?
Well, my intern, we had different interns, but my intern who was there when we were first digitizing, he's an editor, and so he was at BU at the time, and he started to like organize everything, and then when it was time to like apply to things, we were like, all right, well, let's just like cut something together. So we cut that scene, we cut a sizzle reel, and it was really fun working with him. So he became my main editor, and then also, the creative team kind of happens like through either word of mouth, but also like people you've worked with before. But I think that working the editor relationship on a documentary is the most important, and working with this like 22-year-old wonder was the best part of it. Another part of the team was definitely working with my archivists, who were amazing and tireless, and then my sound designer, Lawrence Everson, and also the composers. That was also just like, that's the most fun, is working on the sound and the music. But yeah, you just find people who resonate with it, and then it's like the best part of making the film, the collaboration.
Questions right here?
Just a couple things. How long did it take you to start filming this to the end?
Well, from from when we first digitized everything to when we premiered in June, that's 6 years. But a lot of the time is like looking for money, and then Corona hit. But yeah, it was a while.
Well, my other question was going to be, how did you get funded?
Through
Director,
making.
producer.
Yeah, it was definitely by making like a 16-minute sizzle reel and cutting a sample scene, and having meetings and go like basically trying getting whatever money I could to shoot the initial interviews, and then also using that. So before we were fully financed, a lot of work had gone into it, and I was like still working at other things, and basically for the full financing to come in, so much was already in place. We just had to like then we even had like a very rough assembly, which the financiers saw before deciding to fund it. So it was like a lot of goodwill and a lot of rice and beans, and like my interns living in every corner of my house doing the work with me, and like giving a lot of responsibility to these kids who were great and had so much energy, and then like crew deferring for like a year and a half. And that's also just like, it's really hard, but you have to just do it, and then like have the faith that you are going to be able to pay them, and just be very, very gracious, because they're being incredibly generous with their time and talents. So yeah, it's a lot of favors, and then following through.
What is your next project?
Well, I'm writing a script, like a romantic comedy, which is a totally left turn from this. But then I also am going into a documentary about Pizzagate.
What?
Pizzagate, the conspiracy theory about the pizzeria pedophile ring in D.C. It's a cherry subject.
What were the challenges of getting this film made, just in terms of the climate of the times, and like, I guess in some sense Larry Flynt as a hero in 2021 must be kind of a hard sell. So how did that play out? And I guess I'm also kind of curious what your personal attachment to his story, or if you have one, might be.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see it go from this, like I was literally like in Larry Flynt's archive when Donald Trump announced his campaign for presidency, and I was like, this is amazing. There's so many parallels, but then there's also this ideological difference, and also the fact that they have this, completely different backgrounds too. Larry coming from one of the poorest counties in the country, but so that was fascinating. And then like obviously when that like peaked, you're like, is this still relevant? But clearly it is, with freedom of speech issues still being so pertinent today. And in terms of like Me Too, Larry's like a very difficult character to love, but he also was he was like such an early exposer of hypocrites and just these assholes in power who would just like take advantage of their positions in power. So he loved what was going on during in the beginnings of Me Too. He's like all for it. But yeah, he's a pornographer, obviously, and he's not, there are so many issues around pornography that, like, if this were like an episodic, there'd be so many more. There'd be like definitely like maybe 1 or 2 episodes purely devoted to his enemies on that side. Gloria Steinem and Andrea Dworkin, and really going into that. For this film being 90 minutes, I felt like a cursory treatment of that would just like almost be dismissive. Like it kind of begs for like a full film or an episodic kind of treatment. But I wanted to kind of like stay on track with telling this particular story.
Any other questions?
I'm curious about an amazing job taking that warehouse full of stuff and turning, whoever did your digitization, and that gave a shout out because it looks amazing. But I'm wondering, was there anything in that archive that couldn't be saved that you would have loved to have had in there that just wasn't, got destroyed by that long storage process? That would have been great to be in there?
Well, fortunately, we were really lucky with the digitization, but some things, some of the tape didn't digitize, so I don't even know what was on that. So it's really hard to say. Yeah, you don't know what you're missing until unless you know what was there. But there was no moment of like having something and then being too degraded. And we really we were aesthetically not gonna throw something out because it's like the only copy with a time code on it. We would just like maybe punch in or just embrace the aesthetic of the beta tape, making all these crazy lines across the screen. So yeah, I think that we were very fortunate that Southern California, and it was like in a dry storage facility and not in like a muggy basement on the East Coast.
Anyone else? Oh, that's
Did Tia lose her strength on the company due to drugs and the sickness? Or was that her decline? Because it seemed like when you introduced her in the film, she was a take charge person, and it looked like she was going to run the company or co-run it with him. Is got out of jail or whatever. But obviously, she declined.
Yeah, he really wanted her to be running the company when he was in prison, and then his brother tried to take control of the company. He did actually take control for some time because her health, and because she had AIDS, and also her her drug addiction. So it was very tragic that her like very rapid decline, because she was a creative force from the beginning. I mean, he had these clubs, and he had tried to make a men's magazine. He had like this magazine called Bachelor Beat, and it just like definitely didn't take off. But it was not until Althea came in his life where everything started to take off, and she was involved in every part of his business. From the clubs to then the magazine, and she aesthetically pushed him, and he trusted her. So his sensibility is much tamer than hers, but she had the creative control to push the people who worked in the magazine to like even further humor and just like weirder scenarios. I mean, it's really like a lot of it's her creative vision, and then like his desire to like fuck with people.
Was it your creative choice to keep her part of this story?
Yeah, it definitely was my creative choice to keep her. I wish that we had more footage of her. That was the hardest part, was like just not having so much footage. But yeah, her stories is a fascinating one. That like could be a great narrative, because there doesn't exist too much that I know of. There probably is like a lot though.
One more question.
It works so well as a feature, but it's just like rare to experience like wanting a lot more and just hearing me speak. I am so curious what the like episodic version of this is, and I wonder like if that is something that we would ever work on, if that's something that we could ever see.
Yeah, I think that there definitely is enough material for like a 6-part episodic. I mean, they're like just the backstories of the bodyguards alone, tied with like James Ellroy murder mysteries, are like could merit a whole chapter. So I don't think I could live in like Larry's mind more than I have already, but I think that somebody definitely should. And like maybe like being involved as an EP could be cool. There's a lot there. I think that like a Broadway musical would be the way to do it.
And that, by the way, that question came from the king of obsolete video. So maybe it's something to take on. Well, thank you so much for being here, Nadia.
Thank you.